Terrible.
What, what is your occupation? What do you do? Are you a student?
I'm a political commentator and columnist and also criminal justice reform policy analyst.
God bless you.
By the way, very big fan of your aunt, Monica Crowley.
My what? Are you a lawyer? Are you a lawyer? Lindsay, are you a lawyer?
Oh, her
Nice.
aunt is Monica Crowley, who worked with Nixon.
Is she really?
Oh,
Louis, remember, a joke's only funny if people get it.
I'm going to give one for Ben.
No, he
Okay.
doesn't get your humor, and we're on in
Ben gets
2
it.
minutes.
I'm waiting for it.
Where's Ben?
Dr. Hutschnecker?
Oh, that's right. He was Nixon's doctor. He was supposedly, I don't know. I don't know how this works.
Was that
He was
person real?
a psychiatrist, but I
Yes.
think really was a GI man, right?
He was Nixon's, I'll put this in quotes, internist in New York City, but alleged
Right.
to have
Never
been
had a psychiatrist, although
to be his psychotherapist, allegedly.
I don't think Nixon had a psychotherapist, although I might be wrong about that. There's so much I don't know.
Who was into astrology? Was that Reagan or Nixon?
Reagan.
Nancy,
No, I thought that
Nancy
was-
Reagan.
I
Oh.
think Mr. Reagan was into it. Are you sure, Judah?
Hold on a second. I made a mistake. Just give me 1 second. I know what happened. Hold on.
Tell me, let's, Marie.
We'll be
are
starting
you
in 1
a-
minute. Where's that cord? One cord. Where is it?
Do you and Remzo know each other prior to this, or?
Yeah, we when I was at the Times, we went ahead and published her column as part of our Young Voices program.
Okay, guys, keep talking for 1 minute because I am missing a cord.
Yeah, no, she wrote an excellent piece talking about the basically how third parties basically pull other major parties into discussing certain policy points during an election that might otherwise go ignored. So her piece did extremely well, and she's continued to get published. You've been in like the Detroit News and a couple other places, right?
that's right. Yeah, different stuff in the town hall and gosh, I think the most recent one. Probably town hall would be more recent, but
I was in the Detroit News, but in the police blotter.
That sounds like a joke.
What, are you from Indiana?
I am.
Very cool. One of the greatest films takes place in Indiana. You know what that film is?
It
No
might
Country
be,
for Old Men.
No, is it
No,
League
that
of Their
doesn't take
Own?
place in. No, which is a good
Okay.
film. Very good
Okay,
film.
you guys
And
ready?
it's not
Just
Hoosiers.
okay, enough. You guys ready? That is the best movie bet in Indiana.
And
I
no,
want
it's
to
not.
welcome everyone back to The World According to Ben Stein. I'm your host, Judah Friedman. This is our 6th episode, and we're thrilled to have you. Follow us on Parler at Ben Stein and subscribe to the podcast on YouTube at The World According to Ben Stein. Please tell your friends, your family, your significant other or others. Please tell your acquaintances. And of course, please tell your enemies. We're pleased to welcome back Remzo Martinez, Parler's Director of Outreach and Podcast Extraordinaire. Hello, Remzo.
Hello, Judah. It is Monday. I'm happy to be here. Usually Mondays suck, but when I get to join all of you, it's fantastic.
It's good to know you've landed safely. And of course, let's welcome back our Mr. Louis Fine. Say hello, Louis.
Good to be here.
And tonight joining us is Lindsay Marie as a special guest. She's a political columnist and commentator who primarily focuses on issues relating to individual liberty and criminal justice. And hello, Lindsay. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And finally, the man of the hour, writer, actor, economist, and of course, America's humble servant, Benjamin Jeremy Stein.
God bless you all.
And Ben, I will be in your room in a second, so I could raise the, if you could, the camera's a little off, so if you could push the screen back a little bit, that would be great.
Push the screen back. Oh, okay.
Perfect. You look beautiful.
Thank you. Sir.
And we constantly talk about this, and this is something that comes up on a constant day-to-day basis with us that we speak about. It is not just hatred. It is not just dislike. There is something more at hand with the current president of the United States that the left just has never, I don't even think the word hate is a good enough word, Ben, for how they feel about the president.
Well, I think the Southern Democrats during the Civil War felt the same way about Abraham Lincoln, as I think that level of hatred existed and was probably more than exists today. But otherwise, I haven't seen so much, even during the Nixon days. And as we all know, I was a very low-level speechwriter for Mr. Nixon. I never saw anything like the hatred that had accumulated against him, except now it's even greater. The hatred against Donald Trump is phenomenal, absolutely breathtaking, and I don't understand it. I will tell you, I think I probably told you this yesterday, Judah, that I recently was on the phone. In fact, actually, you were in the car with me, I think, when I was on the phone with a woman in her 90s. She is the widow of my former best friend who's now in heaven. And she said that if Trump won, she was going to buy a gun and kill him. And this is a woman who I'm sure doesn't even know how you operate a gun. And I asked her what she hated about him so much, and she could not give an answer. She just said, I hate him, I hate him, I hate him, I want to kill him. And I have family members, very close family members, who feel the same way about Mr. Trump. I don't understand. I don't understand where that level of hatred comes from. I work at trying to understand it, but I haven't, I think, even come close to understanding it yet.
So let's take it back a little bit, because you've brought it to the escalator ride when the hatred was amplified. But Lewis and I, who are both from the tri-state area, remember Donald Trump in the 90s and the 80s. And Lewis, it's safe to say people loved him or they absolutely hated him. Very much like George Steinbrenner.
Yes, well, and he was friends with Steinbrenner, among others. He was a fixture in the mid to late 80s. But prior to that, of course, I date his prominence or rise within popular culture to his first book. When I say book, the first of many to bear his name, not necessarily written by him, but The Art of the Deal. I was in a world history class where a student who later went to, as he pronounced it, the University of Notre Dame. He was the only American who couldn't say Notre Dame, in South Bend, Indiana, Lisa Marie. And he did a book report on The Art of the Deal. That's when I knew the public schools were garbage. But the only Democrat, and Judah and I have spoken about this many times, the only Democrat that held his weight with Donald Trump was Ed Koch, because Ed Koch was also larger than life, and he and Trump hated each other, but managed to get some things done working together, most notably more than a photo op, which was the renovation of Woolman Rink. And they served each other's purposes, but Koch had a sense of humor, and as a larger-than-life figure was able to counter Trump's insults by calling him greedy, 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 and piggy, piggy, piggy. And he would say it with a laugh. And none of the Democrats who have responded to Trump since his election as president have bothered to study recent history and look at the way that Ed Koch dealt with Trump, because Trump, while certainly a fixture on local media and sometimes even national media, he was a frequent guest on David Letterman. On Late Night with David Letterman, he was not the principal or arch rival to then Mayor Koch or even then Governor Mario Cuomo. So Democrats need only look at recent history to get an idea of how to deal with someone like Trump. They didn't, and that is why I think they're so frustrated by him, in part.
What are your? That's actually a great point. And what are your thoughts, Ramzo?
I remember sitting in my cubicle at the Media Research Center. I was an intern for Newsbusters in the summer of 2016, right around the RNC convention. And for about 8 hours a day, I had to watch MSNBC for 2 hours, The View for the hour it was on, CNN for another 2 hours, and then several different Fox affiliates for the rest of the day. And it was amazing just to see how one man could occupy so much of the talking space. And whether you're talking, national news or local news, I mean, there's real stuff going on in the world. And I was not in any way, shape, or form a Trump supporter in 2016, not at all. But even just witnessing this, it just surprised me how so many people can just have so much hatred for one man, good, bad, for indifferent. The one thing that they provided him was, millions of dollars and essentially, ad space on TV. They say they want to go ahead and destroy him, but what they did was they built ahead their biggest monster. I even equate this to the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. If you don't like Brett Kavanaugh and you thought that he wasn't a conservative beforehand, just look at what they did to him and his family, and you don't think he's going to be spiteful. We saw this with Ken and his wife, the McCluskeys over in Missouri, liberal Democrats, lawyers who had typically donated to Democrat candidates who are now speaking at the RNC in 2020. So what they've basically done is they've created exactly what they wanted. I still think that Trump is a centrist compared to your average Republican and Democrat on the street. He doesn't really have a fixed ideology, but that's what they hate about him. The fact that he's not really anything really other than just being anti-progressive, and that's what they can't stand. So what they have to do is they have to tear him down. They see windmills everywhere, and there's nowhere else to go.
And let's get our guest opinion, Lindsay Marie. Is it just Lindsay, or does people call you Lindsay Marie? Because it's sort of one of those.
People do either or. It's whatever you want to call me.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yes, you may.
What's it like to live in Instagram?
It's amazing.
What's your...
So basically, my thought on the issue of the Democrats and how they attack him and sort of how they view them, it's interesting because they keep wanting him to apologize for things. They keep wanting him to go ahead and concede to them. And over, he never does this. He's sort of the one person and the one sort of figment of their imagination that they can never get on their side. They're used to going after people sort of with cancel culture and the angry mob and getting people to cave and apologize and to go hide. And every time he's done something they didn't like, they kept pushing for that, and he never did it. He's never caved to them, whereas everyone else, Hollywood, different news stations, they've all caved to them, and he's the only one that they can't get to do that.
When you say cave to them, who do you mean? Who is them?
So I would say the progressive Democrat base, when they want him to say certain things, when they want him to disavow certain groups, when they want him to apologize for things he said, things he's done, regardless of, if he probably thinks he's done something wrong, he's not going to apologize. And I think even if he apologized 6 times, they're not going to believe him. It's never going to be good enough for what they're wanting.
Okay, I that's interesting, and that, I think, if I've got it right, is what Judah thinks as well. I think it's much more primitive than that. I've spoken to 2 psychiatrists at great length about this, and they agree with me that it's not about policies. It's not about not apologizing. It's about something perhaps even more basic than Freudian. It is about, he is considered by them a threat to their very lives, or at least to their way of life. He's considered to be a kind of caveman who will just tear down all the temples of civilization. In their view, the temples of civilization have to do with racial diversity and high taxes and not defending this country adequately. He's threatening them. It's not that they're attacking him and he is backing off. He is just by himself a kind of primal force that frightens them and that goes into their dreams and frightens them.
Very akin to one of his heroes, who was George Steinbrenner, who ran the Yankees. And but one of the things about Trump that I wish he would do more, I wish he would talk about more, is obviously you don't want to talk about the things you've done for people, but Steinbrenner, as Lewis knows, was very similar, that he never gave up on people. And Donald Trump was very similar in that way, that he treated little people very right. He was never,
It's interesting you say that. I live at many houses, none of which I can afford at this point because of the pandemic. But I have my main house that I live in with my beautiful bride is just a couple of blocks from the Beverly Hills Hotel, a really nice hotel. And the valet parkers all love Trump. They said when he comes there, when he used to come there before he had motorcades everywhere, he would be very friendly, he would tip a lot, and he would allow them to use his golf courses free. And nobody else in a position of high power would do that. And he was one, they thought that he was one of them. And I don't think any progressive, or any left wing, or any person who fancies himself or herself an advocate of the workers could claim such a connection with a working man or woman. That's a very unusual thing for a Republican. It's super unusual for the Democrats nowadays. There's something that ties him to the longshoreman or to the guy who's sitting on top of a beam, welding beams together to build a skyscraper. There's something, as I say, primal and powerful about him that scares them. And I don't think it has anything to do with any particular policy. I don't really, at least
No, you're right. It really doesn't have to do with any policy. They just hate him.
Right.
They just
become pro. He could become pro-abortion tomorrow. They'd still find plenty of reasons to hate him.
So you're an economist obviously by trade. You've lived many lives and you've written about many people. So Donald Trump is a hillbilly billionaire to a lot of people, right? He doesn't fit the mold of, for some reason in our country, we've put the Kennedys on this great pedestal, many on the left, obviously, when they made their money bootlegging, when they made their, racketeering and all these different things, but somehow their money is.
And we're friends of the Fuhrer.
And for some reason, their money is clean. For some reason, though, on the other hand, there are those people in New York or other places or in Indiana that could be very wealthy, but they're not looked at in the same class. And I think for me, what are your thoughts on that, Lindsay?
No, I definitely agree. I think a lot of times people see him as the American dream, regardless of sort of how he started out. They kind of see him as someone who built his own success. He became a brand. They sort of saw him on commercials and building up this legacy as time has gone on, way before he decided to run for president. And so I think a lot of the American people have seen that. They've watched him grow, his businesses grow. And so they kind of relate to that, and they wanted to be that at some point, the person who started businesses, who continued to keep growing and not just hop off at one. So for some people, I think it was a bit of inspiration or something to look up to.
Or something to be terrified of, and something to say, how could this guy who didn't go to Harvard or Yale or Princeton go this far? Except he did go to Harvard. That's the amazing thing. Right. They keep thinking he's a hick and a dummy, only he went to a very difficult school, as I understand it.
Did he go to Harvard or Wharton?
He went to Wharton undergrad. But I think there are many people who are graduates of Harvard that are sympathetic to Ben's position in equating the two. The Quakers.
It's not incredibly easy. It's not. I mean, I'm sure it's very difficult. I'm not sure, but it probably is very difficult. And he got through it with flying colors. And you can see just when he fields questions, this guy is a very smart guy, extremely familiar with American history and world history and even theological history. But that does not diffuse them from hating him. They hate him because of some kind of primal power that he has. I was talking to my psychiatrist this afternoon. I have to talk to him constantly to keep myself from blowing up with frustration at what's going on in the world today. And and one of them, this very smart guy, said he's not necessarily the scary father to the leftists. He could be the scary mother. And by that, he did not mean the mother effer. He meant the mother. There's something about him that makes people scared of him as a dangerous mother. And that I don't exactly follow it. And I have to say, my doctor couldn't really explain it himself. But as he says it, it's provocative. It's extremely provocative.
Somebody just wrote, Ben, you're their psychiatrist. But, there was a movie in the early 80s, Remzo and Lindsay. I'm sure you're way too young. Ben, you probably never saw it. I know Lewis did. It was a movie called My Bodyguard. And it starred Adam Baldwin and Matt Dillon, and Lewis probably
Chris Makepeace, Martin Mull, Ruth Gordon.
Is that the one? Is that the one?
John Houseman.
Yeah.
What?
Is that the one of Tina Turner where, you know,
No.
you got the song in the background, I will always love you?
No, that was
apologize to the listeners.
That was My Bodyguard.
I'm sorry, America.
But it was a movie
That's
about
The Bodyguard.
It was about a movie about a kid
okay.
that's getting bullied in school. And so what does he do in a new school? So what does he do? He hires his bodyguard. He hires a bodyguard. And I've always looked at, you know, after what the Bush administration did to the Republican Party and decimated it and let its followers be fed to the wolves, Donald Trump all of a sudden came in and became the bodyguard, you know, the enforcer for what became the party of Trump. And I just don't, but in the bodyguard, he never fit in at the right table. You know, the bodyguard isn't accepted in academia. He's not accepted at the parties. He's not, you know, he always had to fight his way. And I think with Ben, with going primal, that's as primal as it gets sometimes.
I think the fact that he had something about him that made the other kids not want to sit at the table is that primal something. And I don't know what it is, but it's like, there used to be a cartoon, a comic in the days when people read comic strips in the newspapers called Alley Oop. And it was about a caveman. And Trump has always seemed to me to be sort of like that caveman, only he also knew how to make a lot of money building buildings. Although, frankly, his skill as a businessman is, I think, greatly exaggerated by him. Certainly, people I know who are wildly successful businessmen don't think he was that great a businessman, but he's certainly a lot richer than I am, incomparably richer. But although I'm not sure if he took net assets versus net liabilities, but anyway, there is some kind of strength he gives off that is frightening. And Eve Kennedy, who is a war hero, although apparently made serious mistakes in the war, and I know Lewis will know more about this than I do, there's some kind of strength in him that just scares his enemies to death. Whether you think of him as a strong mother or a strong father, there's some kind of strength in him that scares his enemies to death.
Go ahead, Lewis.
What errors did Kennedy? What errors did Jack Kennedy make in the war? You're talking about the Second World War?
Yeah.
You said I heard Kennedy and the war. What?
Well, Second World War. He was
right.
He was in the Navy and
right. He was a PT boat captain.
Boat was cut in half
Commander.
by a Japanese destroyer, and he saved people's lives, or at least so I have read. Maybe it's wrong.
No, that's correct.
No, he was a brave guy. He's a brave guy. He was a good-looking guy. He had lots of money. He had lots of girlfriends. But he didn't have that kind of primal power like Samson pulling down the pillars of the temple.
Yes.
I mean,
he was already born to extraordinary wealth. And he said that he had no exposure to the Depression, to the extent that he saw his father maybe tipping people more generously. He said the war was his leveling experience and introduction to people of lesser means and his fellow citizens.
Who are we talking about, Kennedy or Bush?
Jack Kennedy.
Bush said the same thing. But Bush 41 said the same thing, interestingly enough.
But let's get back to
this. It was.
So Remzo, what are your thoughts on why you've shared some of your thoughts on, but what is this absolute disdain for him? Because there are people that have said far worse than him. There are people that have done far worse than him. He's a president that's kept us out of wars. He's a president that before COVID kept our economy, built what some would say is the greatest economy. There is
greatest peacetime economy
ever. I mean, Remzo, you as a young person, you as a younger person than some of us here.
I'm only 12.
What is it like about, especially typically about your age group? Why are they so repelled? Is it because they didn't grow up in a house with a stern father figure? Is it because what is it about him that your generation just hates so much?
I don't think our generation has really strong opinions on him, at least, in an internal level. I think, we really ultimately want one thing. We want the approval of our peers. So you go ahead, and I call myself Mitt Romney's worst volunteer, because before I could even knock on one door, make a phone call, I quit the campaign because I didn't want to actually do the work. I wanted to go hang out with my friends in 2012, and ultimately,
That's why he lost. It's your fault.
It's all my fault. He lost Virginia. That's when everything went downhill here. But essentially, nobody could ever tell me why they really liked Obama. Nobody could really tell me why they didn't like Romney. And I thought the older I got and the more, sophisticated and professional my peer group got, they would have reasons. But ultimately, they didn't. It's because people don't want to really jump into the weeds of things. I think the American people are more politically apathetic than we give them credit for, especially when you look at millennials, which largely identify as independent. They identify as independent more so than they identify as Democrat or Republican. So I think it really just comes down to the societal pressure we put around us. I don't think anyone really has a strong feeling, and if they do, they can't really give a strong reason why, other than the mainstream talking points, which we usually blab at each other. One of the most interesting jobs I ever had was I was a door-to-door makeup salesman. I sold stuff outside of strip clubs and 7-Elevens in Baltimore and DC, and I met all types of people. And what I realized was that when you looked at a lot of lower income people, between the ages of 18 and 45, let's say, they might appear liberal, they might talk liberal, but they like Trump. And they like him because they didn't have to predict what he would be like. He just says what he says. And, they hate the media more than they hate him. And sometimes it's all you need these days to like somebody.
So, Lindsay, sorry, Ben, go ahead.
With great respect, I do know some millennials who really do hate him very vociferously, never articulately, because no one can hate him articulately. There's nothing policy-wise that would make anyone hate him, except for the right to life issue. And that's an important issue to some people, to many people. But there's I think again, it's not policy and it's not even political behavior.
Bingo.
It's something about him pulling down the pillars of the temple just by existing and just by coming down from the elevator on the escalator, like coming down from Mount Olympus, like the gods coming down from Mount Olympus. There was something unearthly about him.
Right, but it helps that he has a background in construction. That's how you tear down the pillars.
I think that's true. It's a tough business. It's a tough job, and you have to learn to be around kind of rough and tumble and rough and tumble.
May I say something? I just want to congratulate Remzo for taking Mitt Romney at his word and you having self-supported from the campaign. I think that's why he lost in 2012.
Lindsay, let me ask you a question. You being a woman and you're a libertarian, are you in all honesty? I mean, I'm sure you listen to a lot of music. I don't want to presume to know what you listen to, but does Donald Trump offend you as a woman?
Not as a woman, no. And I think a lot of people that are around my age group and millennials that say they are for things like criminal justice reform and at the same time say they're going to vote for Biden and that they hate Trump, to me, that shows that they don't know what they're talking about, because Biden is one of the biggest architects of mass incarceration in this country. It wasn't just the crime bill. It was multiple bills from the late 70s until early 90s. And if you look at his record, arguably, he is a million times worse than Trump is on criminal justice reform. But for whatever reason, they completely ignore this set of facts. And every bill that he ever passed, they ignore his testimony when he says things like, lock up the SOBs, I don't care about justice. He calls them predators. He jokes about hanging people for jaywalking. That kind of stuff, they just outright ignore, and they say they're voting for him. It makes no sense to me. It's got to be something else other than, like Ben said, policy that's driving them.
So you and your friend group, though, obviously you have other female friends, I guess. Are they offended at all by his bravado, by his...
No.
Trumpness?
No, honestly, I've heard worse things from people in school, walking down the street, every part of my life growing up. I don't think that things he said were that crazy and out of the realm of stuff maybe I've heard in the past from other people. I'm not happy he said it. I don't necessarily agree with most of it, but it didn't make me look at him as the worst person in the entire world. I would rather look at his actions, what policies he's implementing, and judging him on that part.
Then I go back to, okay, fine, that's great, God bless you. But what what is it then? Something's making these people hate him. As I say, I have a relative, very close relative, a highly ranked graduate of Wellesley College, Grundley Graduate School at Harvard. I'm not going to say which one. Super smart woman. I can't even quantify how much she hates and fears Trump. All the people I know in Hollywood, which is getting to be a smaller and smaller number, hate and fear Trump. My former partner in crime and good friend, Mr. Kimmel, hates and fears Trump. What do they hate and fear about him? What is it? It has to be in him. It's got to be him, not his policies, not his party. It's him. The party basically doesn't exist. The party will just do whatever who's the strongest guy in it at the moment tells them to do. It reminds me of one of the millions of documentaries I've watched about Hitler, in which some Nazi party official from some town outside of Berlin said, I want to do this and this and this with my local Nazi party. So what would you send a letter to them telling them to do it? And Hitler wrote back to him and said, just do it. Just take over the cell yourself and tell them to do it. And that's sort of the way the Republican Party is now, not in any sense like the Nazi Party, but it doesn't really have any kind of firm policy or a principled background. It just does what the top guys tell them to do.
And if you just tuned in, you are listening to The World According to Ben Stein. Of course, Remzo Martinez is here joining us from Parler. We've got Louis Fine, who is joining us from somewhere. We have Lindsay Marie joining us from Indiana. She's a columnist. She's a social justice warrior, a criminal justice warrior. I forgot. They saying social justice warrior is a crime against humanity. And of course, Ben Stein. Somebody wrote me, Ben, and on YouTube, and I want to take it from there because I think this goes to what you're saying. Okay, somebody jokingly said, "Judah, don't go Jeffrey Toobin on Zoom." And if you're not familiar,
don't do it.
What does that mean?
Last week, Jeffrey Toobin, CNN's legal analyst, apparently was, let's say, pleasuring himself in front of many people on a Zoom call. Now,
you're kidding. You're kidding.
No, I'm not kidding at all. I would not make that up.
Ben, don't Google that.
Yeah, and
don't do it.
And the reason, Ben, I bring this up,
that seems hard to believe, but go ahead.
He's been suspended, Ben, I promise you. And the reason I bring this up is, sorry?
Jeffrey Toobin has been?
Yes, Jeffrey Toobin has been suspended by the New Yorker, and CNN.
The New Yorker. He took out his gavel.
for his exploits. And the reason I bring that up is everybody that has knocked Trump for being a womanizer, for the whole Me Too movement, which was spawned, but I believe, to bring down Donald Trump, they've all ensnared themselves in this movement. And Donald Trump is the only one that's unapologetic about being a man. And going back to your thing about being primal, he's never apologized for having many wives, for having girlfriends. He just sits there and says, this is who I am. And I really, so to go to Ben's point, I really think that drives people mad because it's jealousy. They want to have that sort of life.
Now you're getting into something juicy and delicious. Jealousy and envy, big part of it. They're scared of him, but they also envy him. They envy him all that money, all those girls, that fancy airplane. I don't know what kind of car he has, but it probably doesn't matter. I'm sure he doesn't drive it himself. I don't know what kind of furniture he has, but they envy these things about him. Of course, they envy the fact that when he walks anywhere, the band plays Hail to the Chief. I've been at the White House. It's an amazing thing to walk into a room and have the band play Hail to the Chief. Even if you're a speechwriter and have no elected office whatsoever, it's an inspirational thing. Imagine if they're playing it for you. Of course, people are going to envy him, and they're going to say, where did this guy come from? He didn't go to law school. He didn't serve as a district attorney. He didn't work his way up the greasy pole. He just came down that damned escalator, and next thing you knew, he was taking the oath of office.
Yeah, you talk about greasy poles.
Thank you, Louis.
No, I was just making reference to Jeffrey Toobin.
Very, very well. You know that very well, Lewis. This was okay.
Disraeli.
Okay, Lewis.
Lindsay.
Yes.
Hey, Lewis.
What are your thoughts on that?
No, I think there is some truth to that. I think the left typically seems to hate people that are very wealthy, that have been successful in non-traditional paths. I don't think he's the first one that they've hated like this. Obviously, this is a new level of hatred that we're seeing, but this is something typical. And they always like to throw these stereotypes at these people and say that they cheated their way to the system. They use people to get there. They always assume these types of things are how that person got there. It's never through hard work. They never assume that, and they never buy into that.
Well, and by the way, I would, with respect, question your basic premise. I don't think the left does hate people with lots of money. I think they love and worship people with lots of money. I live in a world, namely Los Angeles, and before that I was in Washington, D.C., where money is worshipped. It's absolutely worshipped, and especially by Democrats. They worship it. They worship money. The fact that it comes from Republicans makes it distasteful, but they would love it. They just love it. They love those big houses. They love nice. Well, they don't care about cars, but they love big houses. They love being able to fly in a private jet. They love all those things. If they say they don't love them, the luxurious life, they're just lying their heads off.
Ben,
I think the one thing that's
what would you say about like the Bernie Sanders supporters, especially a lot of millennial Bernie Sanders supporters that were like constantly going after like the 1%?
Well, Ben actually, can I say something? Ben actually wrote an amazing book. I encourage everybody to go buy this book. It's called The Capitalist Code. And in this book, which Warren Buffett actually gave him a great, said, read this book. One of the things that Ben wrote,
there's not a word in this book that I would disagree with.
Yeah, which is coming from Warren Buffett. But Ben brings up a great point in the book, which Ben's whole point in the book, one of the points in the book was when you buy a stock or you become part owner of a company. And that's something Bernie Sanders doesn't seem to grasp, or his supporters don't seem to grasp. They look at the company as evil. They don't look at it, hey, I could be part of that company by buying a stock.
And they don't look at the fact that their pension fund comes from the activities of that company. They're sending their kids to college, sending their their kids' wedding, paying for their retirement. That all comes from the operations of the public corporation. When I hear those idiots in the Bernie Sanders campaign bitching and moaning about corporations, public corporations, I think, who do you think is going to pay for you people's retirement? Where do you think that money's going to come from?
Okay, so there's something else. Sorry, Liz, go ahead.
I'm not so much for psychohistory, but I will say that Trump was in 2016 very transparent about the fact that he is a transactional figure. When asked about his donations to Democrats, or the fact that the Clintons came to his wedding, to his now current wife, Melania, he was very open about the fact that he gave money to both parties. And the reason he gave money to both parties, he said from the rostrum when debating his fellow Republicans, was that he wanted things. He needed things, not in an illegal or venial or criminal way, but he wanted influence, and he knew how the system operated. And that if he wanted the Clintons at his wedding, not because he was friends with them or fans of them, but it served his purposes for celebrity and photo op, that he gave to their foundation or their campaigns or Hillary Clinton's Senate campaign. But I think that the Republicans that sought the nomination in 2016 were under the impression that was one of many things that would undermine his candidacy, that he had been on so many sides of different issues and had given generously to Democrats as well as Republicans. And he was very forthright about that. He's a transactional.
He is a pragmatist. Another reason to hate him, because he is a pragmatist and he gets things done by the strength of pragmatism. Pragmatism is an incredibly powerful ideology. He gets things done, and he doesn't get them done by killing people to get them done like Stalin or Mao Zedong. He gets them done by appealing to their selfishness and their venality and what they want, which is mostly money and power. And he understands human nature at the kind of primitive level of the very, very smart caveman.
So yes, and he's also a very good marketer. He may not be the best business person if you judge his record, but he's a very good marketer of a type. And he was, and we talked about this in previous broadcasts, unlike someone like Richard Nixon, who was never friendly with or beloved by popular culture, but for his one appearance on Laugh-In, Sock It to Me. Trump was the star of a hit reality TV series that was on NBC for many seasons that made the network a lot of money, and people took him for what he was. I remember when Chris Matthews did an interview with Trump from the University of Pennsylvania and compared him. You can find it on, you can do a Google search because I'm OCD about these things, but Matthews compared Trump to Bruce Wayne or Batman as this larger than life figure within the milieu, if you will, of New York City, aka Gotham. And I mean no disrespect by this, but I have to offer a plug because you've been so well behaved and tolerant of me. Everyone should know, Lindsay, that everything in your set is for sale.
You're kidding. You are
perfect.
That was Lewis's last allowed joke of the night. Because it's not a joke if nobody gets it, Lewis.
She understands.
I don't even get it at all.
None of us do, Ben. But getting back to it, there's something also, Remzo, you brought up about Bernie Sanders, and I want to bring up Joe Biden into this, and everybody could sort of partake into this. It's sort of amazing that we look at all these Democratic figures, these famous bastion of Democratic figures, from Obama to Bernie Sanders to Biden to the Clintons, minus their loving foundation. What have they ever done for the little people? What have they ever done to give somebody a job? I mean, I can't think of one thing that any of them have ever done other than having a staff that's running their campaign. They have never, yet they are so, but somebody like Trump, who has donated a lot of money, who has given to the little people, is somehow evil incarnate.
There's one living ex-president that I can speak well of. I can speak well of my impression of George W. Bush, but the one living ex-president I can speak well of, whose presidency was a disaster, who is not engaged in buck-raking of any kind, and you can criticize him for many things, and I can, and I'm happy to do so, is Jimmy Carter. At 96-something years old, he's still, one, teaching Sunday school, and two, engaged in Habitat for Humanity, even if at his age, it's just the ceremonial hammering of one nail. I can, again, let me make this very clear. Let me make one thing perfectly clear. I can criticize him ad nauseum, but he is not engaged in buck raking. He doesn't want it. He doesn't need it. And he returned to Plains, Georgia. The Clintons didn't return to Little Rock, Arkansas. The Obamas returned.
Very, very good point. Very good point. But no friend of Israel.
No, he's not. He's not. Nor was his late national security advisor.
And who is that?
Zbig.
Who is that?
Brzezinski.
Okay.
Yeah, he was Micah's father. But getting back to it, so you guys have I want to ask Remzo that, and I want to ask Lindsay that about. So you guys are of the Apple, and Ben and I were talking about this the other day. The greatest con man of our time was Steve Jobs, right? He created this computer that people buy for $2,000 and made them feel good about buying this computer for $2,000 that is a regular computer. I mean, it's just this simple computer that people walk around with, but they made it change. The Apple computer just changed the world.
I thought that. Yeah, we've had this discussion before.
Yeah, the one thing is, right, you can't.
Couldn't it couldn't break or couldn't be infiltrated infected by a virus.
Right.
Well, that's not true. But I want to say something because Judah knows this, and I'm going to give you a plug, Professor Stein, Stein. The greatest piece of commentary during the course of Steve Jobs' tenure was written by Ben Stein in the New York Times concerning the backdating of stock options, which at the time, seemed like it would be the undoing of Steve Jobs, not just as the CEO of Apple, but would subject him to criminal prosecution, and nothing came of it. And Ben Stein wrote excellent commentary in the Sunday New York Times about it, and Jobs, in response, not to Ben's pieces, but in response to the whole backdating controversy, because it wasn't about greed. He just said, I felt disrespected. It wasn't about not having enough money. It was if we're going to measure success or respect by certain things, and if it's money in this case, well, then I should have gotten X. And Ben was the only person who wrote critically about it.
God bless you, sir. You honor me, sir. God bless you, sir.
Getting back to it, I want to get to Remzo and I want to get to Lindsay with this. How you're of a generation that is being duped and fooled into, with the Bernie, you brought up Bernie Sanders, right? A guy that lives very comfortably. You've never heard one time, wow, Bernie really bailed me out of that jam. Bernie wants to bail you out of that jam with your money, with other people's money, not his money. What happened in that generation that people that made money weren't looked up to? What is it about that? Is it the schools, the education they're getting? What is it that's going on that Bernie Sanders is sharing that's so compelling to people? Because it's frightening to me.
Everyone likes to go after the millennials, but I like to turn the tables. And I like to go after the parents. When we look at our parents' generation, these are the people that were sowing the seeds of what we would have when it came to our, biggest financial crises, when it came to, voting for people that were putting us in the position of, permanent, indefinite foreign wars, when it came to bailing out companies. Everyone likes to go after the politicians, but no one goes after the voters. And I think for your average millennial, I do truly believe, and I'll stand by it, that they're politically apathetic. They really have no succinct ideology. And I mean, when you look at somebody, let's say my age, I'm 25, one of my earliest memories is 9/11, then the invasion of Iraq, then the invasion of Afghanistan, then the 2008 crisis. My parents didn't get a bailout, but everyone else seemed to get a bailout. And when it comes to people like Bernie Sanders, despite all of our challenges, we still grow up in a pretty great country where we don't have big struggles. We don't have revolutions. So people who go through a little bit of hardship, they then want to find that struggle. So when you have somebody like Kooky Bernie that stands up and says that you're being oppressed and you're a victim, and we're going to take Ben's money to give to Lewis to give to me, they see it as something that's easy and bloodless that they don't have to have any real involvement in, but they can feign support for it to get that, peer-to-peer social gratification. So I think I'm wanting something.
That's actually a brilliant idea. What about you, Lindsay?
No, I agree with Remzo. I think one thing about my generation and people that I went to school with was that everyone was sort of sold this idea by our parents and our teachers that if you just go to college and you get a minimum of 4-year degree, then you can live the American dream. You can get this much money, you can have this kind of a house and be set for life. And then everyone starts going to college and then they want masters and higher degrees. And so when everyone starts graduating with all this debt, they're not getting these jobs that they thought they would get. So then they start realizing that some of the stuff that they knew about the world to be true isn't actually happening to them. So then they start to wonder why that's happening. And they see people like Bernie saying it's because of people that are corrupt. It's because of this system. And this is why we need to overhaul it. And I think they're easily buying into that because they're not where they thought they'd be, where they were told they'd be. And that sounds like a good answer.
But I don't understand this. I mean, basically the life of the ordinary young American college graduate, I thought it was pretty good. Am I wrong about that? I thought it was a pretty comfortable life. They have air conditioning, they have cars, they have TV, they have computers, they have, I would think, at least as much food as they could possibly eat. I don't understand. What are they missing? What are they lacking?
With the exception of the cars, you've just described a county jail.
No, I think the food that you get at the grocery store. I mean, you and I think, I don't know exactly where you live. I know it's quite close to me. We can go to pavilions and get very, very good food. I don't think you can get that in jail.
But
It's probably better in jail.
But getting back to it, Ben, I just want to ask you this question because you're a big philanthropist. You've saved many animals and many people. But you have people like Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders who have given nothing. They have given nothing. And I don't care what somebody says, oh, he's given 47 years of service. We could have taken minus 39 of those. But what have these people done? It's a really fascinating thing that we don't admire those that give, those that make the extra phone call. And people are always curious about Donald Trump. Robert Kraft, the famous story when his wife died, Donald Trump called him every week for a year, every week for a year to make sure he was okay. You don't hear stories like that about Bernie Sanders. You don't hear It's this great con job. And I don't know how we end the con.
Well, I will say something in defense of Bernie Sanders. If you watched, I'm not joking. Why he was the only, and he was the only senator. Is the only senator. Maybe Warren is among is in his company. But for years, he was the only congressman and then senator to grill and justifiably grill Alan Greenspan when Greenspan, according to the requirements of the Humphrey Hawkins legislation, would come and testify about so-called full employment before the Congress. And he, in his very regular way, would say nothing and make it sound profound. And Sanders would grill him. Now, I think Alan Greenspan was vastly overrated when you look at the record during the Bush years. If he had left the Fed prior to the Bush years, he would have been known, in the words of Phil Gramm, as the world's greatest central banker. I believe that title belongs to the now late Paul Volcker, who was pushed out by then Secretary of the Treasury, James Baker, who in many respects is the most overrated, disgraceful, in my opinion, public quote-unquote servant, now 90 and friend of the late H.W. Bush, a man for whom I have nothing but disdain because he was wrong on so many things. But Sanders, if you watch the YouTube clips, because they are on YouTube, they're on C-SPAN, he's the only one with some modicum of outrage about, and this is not about a conspiracy concerning the Federal Reserve, I support the Federal Reserve, but about calling BS on people who are spewing it and saying, how can you say this is full employment when you have X number? Why are you engaged in this kind of sophistry? And let's be honest about the Fed and the money supply and the willing suspension of disbelief when right now, for example, we have record corporate bankruptcies. And
Louis, why don't we let Ben, let Ben, since he's the economist here.
Well, I'm frankly extremely impressed with what Louis is saying. I'm shaking my head in amazement. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say anything better about the economists in high positions in the government than what you're saying right now. I'm very, very impressed and very grateful.
So let me ask you a question, getting back to why Trump is so reviled. So you as an economist, remember, we could all acknowledge Paul Krugman I don't even think he's a broken clock. I don't think he's ever been right. You had all these people, Trump brought in, and even you, Ben, in the beginning were a little against certain moves that Trump was doing.
Very much so.
But you praised him afterwards, and you've praised him how he's brought us through COVID.
Right. Well, he's done, I think, a magnificent job. I think if there were any kind of honesty among historians, and if there will be in the future, he will be ranked as a genuinely great president. But then again, I think Nixon was a really, really great president, and he sure doesn't get anything close to the respect he deserves. I don't know if any of these people ever will get the respect they deserve. I'll be long dead by that time, but and my son maybe will notice something about it. But so far, we are not getting much truth out of the historians or the political class. It's interesting. I speak to the Nixon at the Nixon Library quite often. I didn't tell COVID, I used to speak there quite often, and they get large crowds of ordinary citizens, retired lawyers, retired doctors, retired accountants, and and they're wildly grateful for Nixon and for Trump. So there are people out there who do like them. I mean, let's not forget Trump did win the election.
That is
Well, I'll revise and extend my remarks about Paul Kirkman. He has done his more than his share to obfuscate and to unnecessarily complicate a discipline which was never a science. And yet, for whatever reason, if we're going to engage in psychohistory, here is where I will do it. Its leading practitioners have an inferiority complex and believe that they can supplant history with math. And when they intimidate people with theories that don't work in the real world and have no bearing on history, which is more accessible to more people and requires reading and analysis, when they intimidate people with very complex and elegant theories that don't work in the real world, they don't face the kind of criticism that they deserve, because people can't even, they take it on faith that the math is right because they don't know the math.
Well, to use this as a perfect example right now, right? If we were to look at, let's say, the COVID, right? We could all agree in the beginning the math was 2 million would die.
And you had economists that were responsible for those models. They were not public health experts.
So let's get back to it. So let's get back to so Trump is absolutely hated.
By
many millions, by many millions of people. So to peg it down, if each of you had to say one word, because when I posted this online before, some guy, everybody was writing different things. Lindsay, what would you say it is?
Oh my God. I would say personality, but that's not right. I have nothing right now.
Cult of personality, maybe.
Maybe, yes.
Remzo?
He's everything they're not, and they're never going to be him. And I would say the same thing for, many other people. Ronald Reagan, he was an actor, and they constantly brought that up as he was the governor, and then they constantly brought it up as he was president. But they can't get over the fact that this guy is who he is, and he happens to now be the most powerful man in the world. You look at Joe Biden, and he's been in politics since he was like 29. He was on city council, then he ran for something else, then he became senator, then he became vice president. For him, it was predictable. But it's the path that Trump has taken that is always going to rub a lot of people the wrong way. It's like the folks at the Lincoln Project. You have a lot of these folks that have not left their Georgetown apartments for over 5 years now, and they can't take the fact that somebody is now in the room where the decisions are being made, and they're not. That's why you have so many people who are Trump voters who are not Republican voters. And, I look at this as somebody that did not vote for Donald Trump in 2016, but did vote for him in 2020, because I took an objective look at what was going on. And you could tell a lot about a person by the enemies they make. And he's made all the right enemies. And whether I agree with him on everything or not, the one thing I understand is that, at least with him, something positive is coming out of this. I could not predict that with Hillary Clinton, and I certainly can't predict that with Joe Biden.
Great points.
I think what Lewis has said about the economist is so profound. It has my head spinning. But again, I will go back to the fact that I think the leftists and liberals are afraid of him. He represents a kind of primal force that threatens their way of life and their worldview, and they're frightened. There's fear.
So, but we're running out of time. But I just want to have a quick question from all of you. So, Ben, you're obviously you were raised in an era where the Cold War and so many different things. So, and Lewis and I are. We come from a generation where we didn't have much strife, and Lindsay and Remzo, you could say sort of the same thing. I mean, the worst, a few of the worst things was the recession that lasted a little bit, obviously, that you could remember.
That's a very sharp recession.
But you're from a generation, Ben, that was dealt to handle with defeat, that was dealt to handle, sorrow. There was a lot of loss that went on, through wars, through all of these things. And I don't believe when Trump won, the amount of disbelief that those people, that the supporters had, I don't think they were able to handle the rejection. And this is just like a baby when they can't handle the rejection. We have spent 5 years of hysterical children screaming.
That's because it's a cargo cult, and I miss the late Richard Feynman. I am in no way suggesting he would be a Trump supporter. I don't know what his politics were, but in indicting the social sciences, he said, I know, and I can still hear that Rockaway or Far Rockaway accent. And people, please Google Richard Feynman, Feynman, in social science on YouTube. You'll see the clip. He says, I know what it means to know something, how careful you have to be with experiment, how easy it is to fool yourself. And I see the conclusions they arrive at, and I can't believe the things they say. Trump has called BS on the cargo cult, on those things that are not a science. So the day after the election, when polling, which is not a science, when the pollsters have been proven wrong.
That's a great point.
I don't know what the cargo cult is. What is the cargo cult?
The cargo cult is from Richard Feynman's Caltech commencement speech describing pseudoscience. And there was an actual cargo cult that saw the cargo planes from the U.S. military after the Second World War in the South Pacific, and they were worshiping these planes because they'd never seen them before. Hence the cargo cult. The faith in the idea that, one, there is an answer to everything, and two, the belief in scientism, not science, scientism, of which polling is one such phenomenon. So it can't be that the pollsters were wrong. Instead, what? The election was stolen. It was stolen. The pollsters weren't wrong. It's a science. It's a science. Donald Trump, in collusion with the Russians, stole the election. The New York Times, the day of the election, on election morning, had Hillary Clinton at 90-something+% likelihood of winning. That doesn't change unless there's been thievery. So,
what you've said tonight has been extremely impressive. And if I may say so, I have written an awful lot in the same vein.
Well, he reads everything you write, Ben.
Sorry?
He reads everything you write, so plagiarism might be in play.
Yes.
Wildly impressed with you, sir. Wildly.
But Lindsay, as we're closing, but Lindsay, I just want to get your final thoughts from Lindsay Remzo about, the feeling that they were like little petulant children that just couldn't accept a loss. As Lewis said, they couldn't accept, like, somehow science failed them. Did I lose you guys?
The silent treatment because we're old.
No, I agree. I think the way that you see them talk about things, the way that they react to things President Trump has done. I mean, we've all seen the videos on social media of them screaming and acting absolutely mad in their cars over every single thing. It's got to be exhausting to continue to do that for 5 years at this point. They can never find a way to sort of deal with it in emotionally healthy ways. They just scream. They want to shut down things they don't agree with. They don't want to hear it, and they just want it to all end.
Remzo?
I fear for what things are going to look like when Donald Trump leaves, whether it's in a few months or it's whether 4 years. Because what's happened now is that we've seen the extreme politicization of everything. Everything is a fight. Everything is the end of the world. Yeah, the weaponization of everything. And, I do genuinely fear for what his life will be like after this, because how do you just go back to business? What does your family do? And what does this mean for everybody else? I think what this is going to do for us culturally is for the worse. And, I'm looking at, packing up my stuff and heading to some small island elsewhere, because I don't want to be here when people start acting crazy.
Ben Boychik has an extra seat in his car who's missing tonight, but he will gladly, you could go for a
The
ride.
Apocalypse Mobile will be good.
Yeah, I'm sure there are quite a few of them. And Lewis, final thought on that.
Everyone was great. And Lindsay, you're an amazing sport. And any man worth his salt who is not a Trump supporter who wants to date you should be smart enough to lie. I love Trump. I love him. And you're so good on TV.
And this is why I often have to mute Lewis. And on that note, Lindsay, I really want to thank you for joining us. I want to, you did amazing, Lindsay. Putting up with Lewis is not easy. Remzo and I have to do it on a daily, and many people have to do it on a daily basis with endless text strands. And, but I just want to, that'll do it for this episode of The World According to Ben Stein. Please subscribe to our video channel if you already haven't. It's The World According to Ben Stein. Like us on Facebook at The World According to Ben Stein. Follow us at Parler at Ben Stein. Remzo, why don't you tell people where they could find you at Parler? It's at Remzo. And Ben Stein, it's at Ben Stein. And Lewis, I will let you say what it's at, Lewis. What are you on Parler, Lewis? He's at L Fine. And Lindsay.
F-E-I-N.
F-E-I-N. And your group is, what is it called, your group?
My group?
No, Lindsay's group.
Oh, you can find me on Parler, though, at Lindsay Marie.
And I would just want to thank everybody for listening tonight. And we will see you very soon at The World According to Ben Stein. And I just want to thank everybody for listening. Have a great night, everybody.
Bless you all.